Flying high, flying high, flying on broken wings. Flying high, flying high, flying on broken wings. I'm flying high, flying on broken wings. I'm flying
Hey, Dr. Hudson.
Hello.
You can hear me?
Yes, I can. I
Okay.
can hear you quite well. How
Yeah,
are you?
I'm all right in yourself.
I'm good. I'm good, thank you. It's good to
You,
see you.
you also?
Yes, it's it was such a nice day the other day. I said, I hope we don't have such a nice day on the day that we are doing this so that people want to go outside.
Yeah.
So it's kind of cool out. So I think we're in good. We're good. People are going to be
Yes,
one.
ma'am.
Yep, people be inside, and hopefully they will do that and come on with us so that we can have this conversation.
Yes, ma'am.
Um, and so we're going to give our audience another 3 minutes like we normally do, and then we will get started. In the meantime, I want to ask you a question about your first book so that I can tell people. The one from the Pews, is that book still in print?
Yes, ma'am. It's actually available on
Good.
Amazon.
Okay, good. Because I wanted to mention that tonight to some of our guests and see if they were, so that if they're interested in it, they would be able to get it. Did you did you hear the music playing?
Yes,
Oh,
ma'am.
good. That's the music from my book.
Flying
Flying
on
book.
broken
Yes,
wings. Oh,
yes.
wow,
Yeah,
nice.
of course, my husband, he's so talented. He wrote and produced that song for me and,
Oh,
did the
nice.
music, he did everything. So, yeah, I thought I would put that on tonight, just to kind of give us a little bit of a little flavor
Oh, no.
of uh, of that. So you're looking good. You're centered right where you need to be.
Okay, nice. I could
And
see we got Florida here, Detroit,
oh,
or
good,
Michigan here. We got a couple of people
good,
here.
good. I'm glad to know that people are joining us. Yes, I see. I just saw somebody that said my auntie, and it says sweet tea. Who's sweet tea?
SDC, SDSC.
You know, I just have. Oh, I know who that is. I think that's my niece in North Carolina.
Oh,
I think that's I think that's Tamara. Tamara, is that you? If that's you, please write in the comment. Yes.
that music is slamming. I see where Kurt Stone say that music is slamming. It definitely was.
uh, Tamara, is that you? Please put in the comments that it is or isn't so that I know. But I think that's who it is. She's not responding. Uh, but I think that's who that is. Okay, we've got a few people up here, and we've got a minute to go, maybe a little less than a minute. And when that happens, we're going to get started.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. So we have a few people on. Oh, hey, Janet. My friend Janet Van Klein just joined. I recognize that name. uh, yeah, who else is here? Okay. Yep. All right. So, a few more seconds and we will be getting started.
Yes, ma'am.
So, and we at the 6:30 hour. So, good evening, everybody. Thank you all for joining me. I am your host, Dr. PGB Hudson, and I appreciate you coming and joining FOBW. I want to say at the onset of this conversation that I am in no way a professional in the mental health arena, but I do care about mental health. And so tonight we're going to be having a conversation about mental health as it relates to our author, Justin Wilson. So just before we got you on already, Justin, so just before we bring you on so that you can talk to our audience a little bit, let me tell our audience a little bit about you. I'm sure those people who are on know something about you, but there's some people out there who may not know something about you. So anyway, Justin Wilson was born and raised in Tampa, Florida, and born to a 16-year-old mother who has been by his side all these years. And I say that because we know that sometimes young mothers get a bad break. They get a bad rep. But Justin's mother did what she was supposed to do. So she stayed in there. She stayed the course. And so wanted to make sure I mentioned that. Additionally, Justin was raised up in the church. As a matter of fact, I don't know how many of you know, but Justin actually pastored a church for 5 years. And while there, he actually wrote and published another book called From the Pews. And I just asked him just before everybody got on if that book is still available. And he said it actually is still available and it can be purchased at Amazon, along with the book that we're going to be talking about tonight, which is Courageous Vulnerability. And here's a copy of what that looks like. I told Justin to make sure he had his. So we both got our copy, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Additionally, Justin has been writing for quite a while. He started writing when he was 14. He was inspired by the rose that grew from concrete by none other than the late Tupac Shakur. And so he's been writing ever since. He also talks a little bit about his dad. He said his father was never really in his life. And as a result of that, you know, we know how things have a tendency to snowball or to connect with each other or help us or cause us to disconnect. So Justin was married. He was married for 13 years. He feels like, you know, his marriage was a failure and that he would not be able to do for his children what he needed to do because of his own experiences. However, he turned it around. And although he is a divorcee, he is very much involved with his daughters, all of his daughters. He loves them. He's very proud of them. And so Justin is working to be the kind of father that he is supposed to be. And anybody out there who is a father knows that you're always working. It's always a work in progress. It's not something that happens overnight. There is no book that we can go and get and say, this is how it's supposed to be done. And so, Justin, I applaud you for continuing that journey with your children and doing the right thing by them.
That's
one other thing I want to say about that before we bring you on, and that is that Justin is also the manager of a Black-owned company, and he currently resides in East Orange, New Jersey. And as I said, he is the author of Courageous Vulnerability. Justin, how are you?
I'm okay. And yourself?
Good.
You said a
So
lot more about me than I would have been able to say.
Well, you know, it's always difficult to talk about ourselves, right? I always say when I go for an interview, the hardest question that I get is the question that they say to me, tell me something about you. Because you don't want to pat yourself on the back, right? You don't want to sound pretentious. You don't want to sound like you're puffing yourself up. So it's always good to let other people know about you, though, because then they can say it for you.
Yes, ma'am.
And so while you may have thought I wasn't taking notes, when we had our conversation, I was taking notes.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so this evening, our conversation is going to be about courageous vulnerability, but our audience needs to know something else, first of all. This is going to be a mini-series. So while tonight is part one, we will definitely have a part two, and part three will depend on our audience. If our audience feels like they want to come back for a third round, we'll do that. But here's what's going to happen. On May 16th, Justin will be coming back, but he will not be coming back alone. We will also have him joining us, the mental health counselor, Consuela. And Consuela will be coming in. She'll be on with us at the same time. The three of us will be here together. And those people in the audience who'd like to ask questions can ask questions of her. You can ask questions of Justin, however you want to do that. But we will be back May 16th, same time, 6:30 p.m., and that will be our part two. So we're not going to promise you a part three yet, but we do promise that we're going to have a part two. Now, in part one, Justin and I had a conversation. One of the things that he talked about was that COVID had him in isolation. And we talked about the fact that it had the whole world in isolation. But during that, he says that he learned three things. One, he said that he realized that he had missed a lot of living, missed a lot of his life. Two, he also realized that he needed therapy. And because of his mother and his sister, they encouraged him to do that, and he did so. And three, he shared this quote with me, and I will share it with you. He said, God gave us therapy for a reason. Get your mental health checked out. Don't sit on your trauma. It won't go away. You have to be intentional about it. So Justin, talk to us a little bit about what you mean by that kind of intentionality.
So throughout my life, with all of the experiences that I have been through, I really didn't know much about mental health. I didn't know anything about therapy, but I was experiencing things that therapy could explain. So, for example, my introduction to the word trigger in therapy made me feel like I'd never be triggered. And then I had another experience. This in the book. The first time I ever actually had a trigger that I experienced in the moment, like I was able to process it as I was experiencing it. Um, and I realized that these things that keep you up at night, that's causing you bad health, that you can get into a place where you're moving forward in life, and then one thing shifts and you get triggered, and it can knock you off your feet. Um, because we're not dealing with it. We think we're just going to be quiet over it or live over it or work over it. I know a lot of men in my research. Again, let me also say I'm not a mental health specialist. I'm an advocate. I just encourage, especially Black men, but I encourage all men to get the mental health help that you need. But um, I worked over it. I worked out over it. I did a lot of different things to try to just push it out of the way. But when that that lockdown happened during COVID, you couldn't do any of that. You had to sit with it. Uh, and yeah, I watched a lot of videos, and I found myself watching mental health um videos and just listening to the conversation, and more I was just like, you know what, like I gotta stop playing with this. And I started asking more questions, and like I said, my younger sister uh at the time was a therapist, and my mother was getting into therapy, and they encouraged me to get into it. And I fought it for a while, believe me. But after I got into it and realized that what I had seen on TV wasn't really doing it any justice, um I realized for me it's necessary. I think a lot of people, um, especially in our community, should get into therapy.
Yeah, and we do know that right now in our not just our country but in our world, there are lots and lots of people who are suffering from mental illness, some kind of mental illness, some kind of mental breakdown, something to do with being in a mental space that people can't always figure it out, and like you said, it was difficult for you. You were trying to figure it out,
Right.
but found yourself in a situation where you just didn't know what to do.
Right.
So now, at the when I read your book, and I would encourage everybody out there to read the book because it's a great read. You also said that you were very comfortable talking about your story, and we've talked about your story quite a bit. You said you're also comfortable with telling your story, and you mentioned just a minute ago, in what you were saying is how you mentioned something about Black men, and so that's where I'm going with this. When you talk about you telling your story and talking about your story, we know that for the most part, Black men don't do that.
Yes,
They
ma'am.
just don't do that. Like as women, we tell our story. It has been even said that that's one of the reasons that women are so much healthier than men, because when we've got a burden, we let it go. We either we cry about it, we talk about it, we yell about it, we fuss about it, we do all of the above. But men don't generally do that. And I'm saying men in general, but especially Black men. Yet here you are telling your story. Why is that?
I realized that I've lost a lot of friends. I've lost, and I watched the world around me. Like we said in the beginning, I was a pastor of the church. So I have a I try to, my focus is people. I love to see people thriving and doing better. I'm not a pastor anymore, but I still love to see people thriving and doing better, right? So I listen to hip hop, not very often, but I listen to it, to understand what's going on in it. So, for example, I listen to a lot of drill music and I listen to a lot of Chicago drill, but the thing about Chicago drill in particular is that those guys are talking about stuff that they really do. So these guys are comfortable with taking lives, they're comfortable with losing their lives. And for me, that has to be tied to some kind of trauma, even if it's not theirs, even if it's the trauma that their parents held that they passed down to them. And I'm like, man, like we gotta it's okay to be a human being as a man. The reality is men do hurt. I know I'm not the only guy that hurt. I know that a breakup hurts me just as much as it hurts somebody else. I know that you could be watching um something on TV by yourself as a guy, of course, and it could cause you to choke up. These things, you're human. And I think that trying to maintain the trying to maintain what the world say a man is killing us. Even if it's not a bullet, it's causing your blood pressure, it's causing you diabetes, because you're stressing and it's causing your body to be thrown off. And I just want to see people, but again, Black men, I want to see us doing better. I want to see better families. I want to see kids raised up in a healthier environment. And I I believe wholeheartedly that that is tied to mental health. As a man thinketh, so is he. So um, if we get our thinking right, if we get our mind right, we can move forward. Um, we can move forward and stop losing so many. Um, I feel like we lose so many people. I'm in East Orange, but it happens in East Orange. It happens in Newark. It happened when I lived in Tampa. I watch it happen in Chicago. We watch these things everywhere where people are losing their lives because of the lack of awareness in mental health. And if I can contribute to a police officer or somebody saying, you know what, let me try this de-escalation training that they taught us. Let me see this person as a human being who's having a problem. Um, if we could see, I think even in relationships, if we could see each other as people, human beings, we are man, you're a human, woman, you're a human, but you're human. You have things that you are experiencing. And I think trying to act like that you don't experience things and that you don't have feelings and that nothing bothers you, I think that's insane. I don't think that's real. And I think that people should, obviously within reason, I think that people have to what's the word? I want to encourage people to be human. Be your human self. Feel. Don't not feel. Not feeling that's not real. I know
Right,
what not feeling got me.
right. And you said so much here, and And part of what you said, I think, makes us understand, and I'm sure our audience feels this too. It makes us understand where your title, Courageous Vulnerability, comes from, because you are being vulnerable when you are putting yourself out there the way that you have expressed that you've put yourself out there, and especially as a male. Because as you said, sometimes what happens is, I think when we look at men who express themselves the way that you've said you've expressed yours, it's looked at as a weakness of some kind. But it really isn't a weakness, is it? It's like
No.
it's a part of the human spirit, right?
Yes, ma'am.
And so we have to continue to you in particular as a Black male have to continue to engage with people around you in that way, so that you can continue to not only be that advocate, but to continue helping them. Like you mentioned something about de-escalation training. Is that something that you're involved in?
It's not something that I'm necessarily involved in, but when I have officer friends
Mm-hmm.
that I have conversations with, and they talk to me about how they've done it. Like, I'm the type of person, I know officers, so I'm open to work with the police officer. I am not, I don't know if this gonna lose any, but I'm not one of them defund the police people. Like, let's work with the
Mm-hmm.
police. They are a necessary for the community.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I say let's work with the police. And so I remember, I'll say this. I remember, yeah, I work. I don't officially work with police officers, but I feel like if I can have a conversation with a young man to tell him how to de-escalate it when he's dealing with the cop,
Mm-hmm.
which I've had those conversations before. In that way, I work with police officers.
Okay, good, good, good. And I think that's important. Any kind of way that you can help out, right? Because you said that you're an advocate and you want to help. So how you advocate is how you advocate. So
Absolutely.
we all have to do what works for us. Let me just stop right here to see what's going on in our audience, to see who's here and who's saying what. So let me see. We've got quite a few people, as I said before. There's Micah Matheny
Hmm.
has joined. Derek Fullwood.
That's my uncle.
Okay, RLS Media. Hey, Jordan. Jordan has joined. RLS Media says hello.
Hmm.
You have another person here, Derek Fullwood, I believe, Senior, says, proud of you, man. Can't wait to get the book. Yeah, you got to get the book. You know, Courageous Vulnerability. You got to get that. It's a worthwhile read. And while we at it, let me just say to you, it's a quick read too. There's a total of 85 pages in here, and in that 85 pages, you can go through it rather quickly. So make sure that you do that. Okay, so we've just got a few people. Okay, here's someone, Charlotte, I believe. Hello, nephew. Proud of you.
That's my aunt from Florida.
Okay, OG Nick, love you, Unc. So,
That's my nephew.
yeah, so we've got quite a few people here, and so I'm glad that people are stopping by and making sure that they are supporting you.
RLS
So
Media
now,
just asked the question.
I'm sorry.
RLS Media asked the question, I think it was.
Oh, let me see. Did you see a question up there? Let me go back. Let's see, RLS
My
Media.
sister
I,
Lisa is on it. Thank you,
I
Lisa.
don't see a question from
You
RLS
said
Media.
how
Oh, there we
long did
go.
it RLS Media said how long did it
Right.
take you to write the book?
How long did you take to write the book?
So the book is I want to say like 25 poems. It wasn't continuous writing. It was just as I got inspired. Like, the way my process work is, as I get inspired, I start to write. Sometimes I can have days where I'm getting inspiration and I'm writing a lot of stuff, and then sometimes it's not like that. I get busy, my mind can be cluttered. I go a couple of days without the gym, my mind get cluttered really fast. I have to go to that gym and work out. So it took from the last book to this book 3 years. Um, yeah, so it took from the last book to uh from the last book to this book 3 years. I don't know if you want to address it, but we got another question.
Yeah, so
So
why
was
don't
there?
we answer that question, then I'll go back. This question says, was there a lot of hesitation writing the book? So why don't you answer Natasha's question, then we'll move on.
Okay. No. Once I started therapy and I realized how helpful it was, once I started applying self-care, like when I'm on the internet, I watch a lot of stuff about, I try to watch stuff that I'm learning from. So I kept hearing this term self-care, self-care, self-care. And, you know, a lot of people have their definition of what that meant. But when I got into the gym and the mind fog left and everything like that, I'm like, you know what? I think I have something to say, and I'm going to say it in a book. And so, nah, there's nothing, everything that I shared in the book, I'm willing to stand on it. I didn't have any hesitation because the reality is, it's me.
Mm-hmm.
People gonna feel how they gonna feel or not gonna feel how they not gonna feel, but it's me. This is who I am. So I'll take it.
Right. Okay, and so that brings me to my next question. So one of the best things I think that happened to you, Justin, that we talked about was the fact that you realized that you had been traumatized as a child, but that you did no wrong. You
Right.
were a victim. And so that in itself shows progress, because we know that we always say this thing about, you know, the first step to solving any problem is recognizing that there's a problem. And so while that sometimes sounds cliche, it is not cliche in this instance, because you recognize that you had identified your problem. And when you did that, you found that you had played no wrongdoing there. You
Right.
were a victim. Now, you posited yourself in a very good place by doing that. And so your victimization started when you were 7 years old and continued through some years. And so now my question is, when did you realize that you hadn't done anything wrong and that you were in fact a victim?
Um, when I actually allowed myself to think about it, I was probably about 30. The thought, the processing what happened around 32 years old. Um, so that's a lot of years of just dealing with the trauma. I want to make sure I add that part just because I want people to understand you can sit in this for a very long time.
Mm-hmm.
But around 32, I actually started to process the trauma. And I am not a fan of victim mentality. Um, but it was difficult for me to admit that yes, you were victimized. You are a victim.
Mm-hmm.
Now that doesn't take anything from you,
Mm-hmm.
uh, but that is what happened. And so, um, yeah, it took from like, I mean, I guess during the time I don't count the years that I was going through it, but uh, yeah, I think I started thinking about it. I think I started just dealing with what happened, and then again, therapy, having the conversations that needed to be had, doing the work, and accepting the effect that it had. Yeah, I would say that's what happened.
And you know, Justin, when you said 32, you sounded hesitant, and maybe because you're thinking that's a long time, but it isn't.
Mhm.
It isn't. I mean, as a person who was traumatized as a child, my mom was 47 when she passed away, and she left this earth never knowing any of the trauma that I experienced, none of it, because I couldn't tell anybody. You were fortunate enough that you were able to talk to somebody. I didn't have that. I wasn't able to talk to anybody. And so I was a full adult too, when I
Mm.
was able to recognize this, that I needed to talk to somebody. But we find ourselves talking to somebody, however we do that, like whatever way it is that we do, we each find our own way to do that. And in your case, you recognized it first in yourself, But one of the questions that comes out of that is the question about your father. You know, you said you mentioned that your father was not a part of your life. And so my question to you is, what was the impact of the absence of your father with all of this trauma? You know, understanding now that you being a male, you could have certainly benefited from having a male in your life, especially your father. So what was that impact like? And then the other part was to that was, since he did not do what you would have expected as a father, who or what filled the void?
So I'm glad you asked that question that way, because I definitely don't want to come up like I had a stepfather. Derek Forward Senior is up. That's, like I said, that's, you know how you got the uncles, the cousins that's way older, so they uncles. That's
Right.
been my uncle. I don't know how to not call him. It feels weird to call him cousin. So I had people like that in my life. I've had different people growing up in the church. So I had male figures. I want to answer the question about, as far as my father goes, carefully, just because we are in a different space now. We're in the process of reconciliation. We've been able to have conversations to so that I can understand him. And the beauty of therapy is that I learned to listen. And so being that I'm able to listen to him, I can get his perspective now, and I don't have to be so angry, and I don't have to be so mad. I don't have to be so mad at him. So what filled the void was family members, having a big family, having older cousins who were big enough to beat you up, and would definitely not let you get into certain things. And you know, obviously, I still got away and got into things, but I can't say that I didn't have father figures or male role models in my life. It just, so this culture, if you don't mind, I got to bring this up. So I feel like this culture kind of promotes the dad not there stereotype. And sometimes I'm not saying it's legitimate reasons, but I know the conversation I had with my biological father made me see him not being there. I can't say I understand it. I can't say that it's okay. I acknowledge I got a unique set of circumstances because I did have people, positive influences in my life. But after a conversation with him, I'm okay with the way things are. And I'm just in a place where I don't want to be there anymore, and I'm moving forward with that. But the voids that filled it was definitely family members.
Well, I'm really glad to hear that there's some reconciliation in progress with you and your dad. That's great. It's never too late. Just proves us it's never too late, right?
Absolutely.
And that's what you're doing. There's another question here. The question says, do you feel like God reintroduced it to you at 32 so that you can deal with it?
I believe so. So when I say reintroduced it to me at 32, I kind of actually entertained the thought. When I pastored the church, I talked to multiple young men who had experiences, and that made me say, that made me have to deal with it. I accepted that it wasn't going to go away at 32. And I do think that, you know, God let me experience that experience that pretty much brought it out. I wrote about it, and all these years later, I'm putting it out there. And I'm hoping that there is a young man that can realize that that didn't take nothing from his manhood, that didn't take nothing from him. He was he was victimized, but that's not the end of the story.
Right.
Not the end of
Right.
the story at all.
Right.
You can keep going.
So I know that we're right at the 7 o'clock hour, which is usually our time, but I want to say this, just a couple of things before we leave. First of all, I want to encourage anyone who either has read the book or intend to read the book. You know, you want to read the whole book, but I want you to really, really go back to that first poem, Pray, and that's P-R-E-Y, not P-R-A-Y. Very, very powerful piece on page 2. So if you get an opportunity to go back and read that piece, I think you should read that piece because it's very, very important piece. Also, Justin has been talking to us about the trauma he experienced as a child, but he talked about the therapy helping him, he talked about family helping him, and he talked about the other positive influences on his life. And he ended by saying, but all of this is not the end of the story. And he is absolutely right. So when we come back for our part 2, one of the things that we're going to talk about is the effects of molestation on a male figure. We're going to talk about that. And Justin, again, as I had said to you before, Justin is very open. He's very comfortable with talking about what has happened to him. So he will be talking about that. And we will also have our counselor on, who will be here to answer any questions that Justin might have, questions that you as the audience might have, questions that I might have. And so we're looking forward to that. Remember, that's going to be May 16th at the same time, 6:30. We strive from 6:30 to 7 o'clock to see how we go. We right at the 7 o'clock hour, so I think we did well. I'm looking to see if there are any other questions before we leave, so that if they are, we address those too. I see someone asked the question, what are your top 3 poems that you recommend in your book? And Kurt Song says he is a very brave young man. So let's go first with the top 3 poems that you recommend, if you have that recommendation for us. And we'll go from there.
My top 3 is Pray, just because of how personal it is. I Apologize, which is the follow-up to Pray. Again, that's you have Pray, which is one side of the story, and I Apologize, which is the other part of the story. And I like See Each Other too. Those are my 3 favorite poems in the book.
Mm-hmm. So RLS Media says your shows are too short. This should have been an hour show. They generally are an hour. And I don't have a problem.
I'm not stopping you. I'm good to go. So it's totally up to you.
I'm ready to keep going if that's what you want to do.
Let's keep going.
Okay. So we will continue. Thank you, RLS Media. Okay, so Justin, let's start where I said we would start the next time, and then we'll pick up from there. And that is, we talking about the effects of molestation on a male figure. So you know, as a child, you mentioned that you received your education in school, and that your church, because your church had I believe your church had a school, but it was also at that school where things started to happen. Can you provide us with some background on some of those things were?
So the abuse happened in an environment where it the person was able to hide it. It was a older woman, and they were able to hide it. They were connected to people with a name, and the thing is like, over the year, when it first started, I didn't understand it, but over the years, you start to learn about sex young. Like, the thing that I realize is that when we're trying to keep sex from our children, they probably already know if they're in school.
Of course.
They don't necessarily have the responsibility, but they are
they're more knowledgeable than we do.
They are
right?
a lot knowledgeable, a lot more. So I had my experience Um, I had my experience, and I kind of grew up to like I grew to the point where growing up having that experience in the culture that we live in that says, oh, you just got broke in early. Um and and then I watched a lot of it was confusing in the culture because we tell young women not to do it. We tell young men you better do it. You tell people not to have kids, but we promote the thing that causes children to be had.
Right.
And it's such a confusing culture. And so growing up as a young man, not to give too much of the book away, or at least that particular piece, you have a desire to be what you hear. You have a desire to see these things. But there's also when you find out that, hey, maybe this is wrong. For me, it made me kind of hesitant, and it made me afraid to do what everybody else was doing. But there was the social pressure to do it. So I spent a long time lying, saying I was doing it, but I wasn't. I didn't want nothing to do with it. It was rough. But yeah, I wouldn't say I blame. Just to be clear, I'm not blaming the church. I'm
Right.
blaming. I fault the individual. But yeah, it was the effect that it had on me is I lived in a world that said as a young man I'm supposed to be, but I didn't want to.
Right.
I didn't want anything to do with it. And then when I finally did break out of that, I couldn't control
Right.
it, and so set up because of the way it was introduced, I was set up for failure in that arena from day one. And I think that because we are told you can't cry and that's healthy and that's normal for young men, a lot of young men don't talk about their trauma, or they're being informed in a context that says this is how you're supposed to do it, but then we end up in situations where people who are kids are having kids and the kids are losing out. And so yeah, I think that's I think it affected me in that I went into the whole thing uninformed. I had to become informed later.
Right.
And I think it would have been better had I been informed first, then, but social pressure and social the way it happened had an effect, a major effect.
And as it should have had a major effect, because you're saying you were not informed, but think about it. You were 7 years old. You were not supposed to be informed, and the person who took advantage of you was much older than you and knew better, obviously. And even if you didn't know better, that person was supposed to have known better. But at 7 years old, you were not supposed to know what it was supposed to be like to experience sex, to be involved with someone sexually. And so when you say, and then after it happened, I lost control. I couldn't gain control. Well, that's all of that is a part of what happened. All of that is a part of the experience that you have. So you see, what happens is, what's happening here is that you're saying, I lost control and I just wanted to just do it all the time. Well, the flip side of that is what they say about women, that when this happens to women, they become promiscuous. So it's wanting to do it all the time. So it's the same kind of thing, but it's all because someone has taken advantage of us, and we have not had the kind of therapy or conversations with people that we need to have. That's for anybody who's been traumatized. And so as a result, we see these behaviors manifesting themselves and we don't know where they're coming from, but we do know where they're coming from. Your behaviors came as a result of what had happened to you that should not have happened to you.
Right.
So I'm glad that you stopped, because one of the things that I didn't hear you say now, but you did say when we were having our conversation, and that is that you took a break. So you
Right.
took a break for about a year.
Right.
Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, so I had a situation come up and it kind of let me know I wasn't in control. And I have an issue with not being in control of my life. I like to kind of be in control of my life. And I took a year and I just said, this is not how this is going to work. You know what I'm saying? Like I was living a particular life at that time, and I kept seeing this person having a baby and this person having a baby, and then someone I know caught something.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, oh no, I don't want no part of that.
No parts of that.
It's not funny, but that's the thing that made me say, okay, this has to be controlled. And I learned in that year to value people more. So I had a different, it gave me a different appreciation of the women or woman that I was dealing with at the time. It gave me a different appreciation for it to not just be physical. Mm-hmm. And I hold that to this day. There's an appreciation I have. It's not just physical. I'm not interested in just physical at all. I'm that's not my thing. So yeah, it's that's what it did for me.
Mm-hmm. Oh, okay. Now I want to go back to something else too that you said, because we want to make sure we're clear on this. Initially, we talked about a lot of this starting at the church, and you pointed out that you wanted to make sure that our audience knew that the church also helped you. So you also talked to me about how the church helped you in other ways, like keeping you from being whatever. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So, you know, I was raised around men in the church. A lot of my uncles, family members were in the church, and they did their best to help us stay away from the streets. They kept us in football. They kept us like I've been working since a very young age. Like I'm a true Southern kid. I know how to cut grass. I know how to rake. I know how to paint. I know how to change a tire. Like all of those things that I took for granted. I thought everybody knew that stuff growing up. Those are the connections that I have that I can tie back to family and to the church as well. And again, like these are not conversations that I would have had with anybody at the church. So I guess I can say nobody helped me with those conversations because I didn't have those conversations with anybody there. But it definitely there are things that to this day I benefit from. Like if somebody needs their yard cut, I know how to actually, like I actually used to do very good cutting grass. I've experienced homelessness in life before, so I've been one of those guys that was waiting for somebody to pick them up to do a job, and I went from dealing with not being housed to, because of that teaching of how to paint and how to do sheetrock and how to do these different things, I was able to go from homelessness to having somewhere to lay my head doing those things. Now, those are not things that I was passionate about, but I was able to put money in my pocket and to be able to provide for myself because of those things. And that was the benefit of having uh, men in your life to teach in my life to teach me those type of things. Like my stepfather, and I don't really care to call him that because he's been more than that. But my stepfather is a chef. I know how to cook because I was with a man that knows how to cook. He's a really good cook. He's a chef. I don't want to call him a cook. He's a chef. He's a really good chef. But having those other people in my life, like all my uncles are athletes. My older cousins that I call, all of them are like super athletes. Like, so my commitment to being athletic, I know that comes from them. My commitment to do things the right way. I would associate, again, at the time that I was like involved with the church, all of my family was there. So it's kind of like tied together because when I look at the people there, I'm looking at biological family members. So yeah, it's I guess that would be the good thing about it is that I had people there that said, hey, this is what you want to do. Now, I did get old enough to make different decisions, and I did make different decisions.
Of course.
But I definitely had people saying no. And when I got as far as it was for me to go in those decisions, because of that foundation, I was able to come back. Thank God for allowing that to happen. But I was able to come back because of that foundation. I believe wholeheartedly because of that foundation.
So it sounds to me like the church, and when I speak of the church here, I'm talking about your family and those people who helped you, because you said they were your family members and men in the church who were willing to help you do what you needed to do to become a man, right? So that was the balance that was created. But we know that also that there was a flip side to that balance, because you said the fact that this woman had been molesting you from the time you were 7 years old to you were 11 years old, it created in you some other things. You said that it made you aggressive and it made you very angry. So can you talk us through that a little bit? Because we know now the good things that you did. You learned how to do things. You learned how to take care of yourself. You learned all those things. You could earn money and you could cook and all these good things. But we know that there was no perfection, right? You were not perfect.
No, not
There
at
was
all.
the aggression and the anger. So talk to us a little bit
So
about that.
I've experienced in my life at a time where I had the kind of anger in me. I want to preface this by saying I do not think this way anymore. So I experienced bullying by some older guys growing up, and I definitely in my head said that when I got older, they were gonna pay for what they did. And I got older, and I had access to things that could have really made I could have really changed their lives and my life and a lot of other people's lives. And I battled with that anger because when I grew to understand that what was happening, I was being taken advantage of. And then when you're bullied, it's being taken advantage of. And I decided nobody's going to take advantage of me. And the people that did take advantage of me, I'm a lot bigger now. So I wanted to show them this is not that's not what this is going to be. And I'm grateful to God for the intervention, because it was truly a one-on-one experience with God that I feel like he came to me and he was like, don't do that. Literally just told me don't do it, because in my head and in my heart, I was going to make I had already made the decision to change
Mm-hmm.
a lot of my life. I didn't care about my life. I grew up hearing you're gonna be dead or in jail by 15. And I believed it and I was okay with it. Okay. Like this is why that mentality of those young brothers in Chicago resonates with me so much, because I know what it's like to not care if you live or die. I know what it's like to not value your life to the point where you don't care. What is the world missing if I'm not here? I know what that's like.
Mm-hmm.
So to see that in young men who have a different experience and everything, and these young men are actually losing their lives. For me, it's like, God, I thank you, because I was right there.
Mm-hmm.
There was nothing my mother could have done. There was nothing my family could have done. There was nothing the church itself could have done,
Mm-hmm.
because of the seed, the way those seeds were planted. I didn't care anymore.
Right.
And I don't think God cared for me so that I can care about me. I want to be able to share that with somebody else. And I believe there's a lot of ways that a young person can get to the point where they don't value themselves. And I gotta say this: you don't even know you don't value yourself at that time. It's not like, oh, I don't value me. It's you don't even know how to care
Mm-hmm.
about yourself. Don't know how to value yourself. The conversation about self-care and therapy and everything back in those days, that wasn't a conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, going to therapy, that's not a thing back in my day. And I'm gonna be 40 this year. So that's how far removed it's not.
Mm-hmm.
But I also see young people that have when I'm looking at a young man or a young person that does not care about themselves, I remember that. So I don't know how they got there, but I remember not being able to value me.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I wholeheartedly believe if you are breathing, you're valuable. Yeah, like I think to me, we as a community have to place value back on our people, human beings. We are valuable because we wake up in the morning. We are valuable because God decides to allow us to continue to breathe. That's my belief, so that's how I have to
Mm-hmm.
see it. We are valuable because we are valuable because we are valuable because it has nothing to do with what you have in your account. It has nothing to do with the decisions that you've made. We've made decisions that does not display our value, but we are still valuable.
Mm-hmm.
And I really hope that we all can see each other and see the value in each other, because I think a lot of that stuff will stop. I see yeah, it's we are valuable
Right.
because
Yeah. So one other thing, Justin, you talked about. We had a conversation offline where you talked about your marriage,
right.
and not one time. And let me just be clear to our audience: not one time did Justin blame the other half for anything that happened. He was very clear about that. So I want to say that you attributed your failed marriage, you said, to the molestation.
Right.
But you don't know if the therapy really would have helped or kept your marriage together, or whatever the case might be. Um, is that something that you still feel, or do you feel like now if you could do it all over again, it might work better, differently, or whatever the case? What's your thinking around that?
I would say I don't necessarily feel like the molestation affected the marriage so much as I don't know if it did.
Mm-hmm.
Um, if I could do it all over, if I'm being completely honest, no, ma'am. I would take life as it is now.
Mm-hmm.
I've learned from it. I've grown from it. I'm happy with. I fought getting here, but I'm happy being here.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't want to be here, but I am here. Because of the lessons that I've learned.
Mm-hmm.
I think that the way I think now, I could be a better man than I was.
Mm-hmm.
And I also know more about me so that I can't be dealt with any kind of way anymore. I realize that a person that it takes anybody that knows themselves, it's going to take a special type of person to deal with them because they know themselves.
Right.
And I experienced getting to know myself with a person who encouraged me to know me.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a different ball game.
Right.
And I wouldn't change that.
Right.
I just be honest with you.
Right.
I wouldn't change that. No, nothing bad to say. As
Right.
I continue to maintain, I would never. My daughter shared two parents.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm okay with where life is
Good.
now. You know,
Good.
I'm grateful for it.
Okay, so we are coming down to the end now. So as RLS Media said, we've done an hour. We're almost there,
Yes,
right?
ma'am.
So I want to just say this to you. When people read your book, I know that some will say, "Oh my God, there's so much darkness here." But when I read your book, I saw the darkness, but I also saw the light. You know, I saw the light because I was able to read through there and understand pretty much where you were going and where you were coming from. So how do you explain that? How do you explain that light in the midst of all that darkness?
It's always, like I said, if you wake up in the morning, it's always a chance for better. I am admittedly a negative Nancy, but again, being around healed people, and that's what I want to encourage. Like a healed person is not going to let you destroy their peace, but if you can just get around a healed person and learn from it, seeing healed people encourage me to go for the healing. And just know, no matter how dark it gets in that book, keep going.
Yep.
Yeah. By the end of the book, it ain't so dark no more.
Yep. That's
but
right.
The life that I shared my life as it was for me. This is how I experienced it. And my encouragement is to just keep going.
Well, we have another audience question, and the question says, so Jay, would you say that when you got married, it allowed you to block out your hurt? And when the marriage felt, all the hurt from childhood came back? When the marriage fell, all the hurt from childhood came back?
So the hurt from the marriage was strong enough to not let me think about any of the molestation and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, COVID, that was a solid year of isolation. I couldn't think about anything else. Like, COVID showed me that I wasn't ready for prison. Cause man, that's COVID taught me that we, despite what we say as human beings, we need each other.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you need human interaction. You need to be able to talk to another human being. You need fellowship. You need companionship. Like I need it. I can't speak to nobody else.
Mm-hmm.
So COVID put me in a place to where when I just sat still and it wasn't no TV, I watched everything I could watch on TV. And now my mind is saying, you're going to deal with it now. That was COVID did it.
Mm-hmm.
COVID forced me to deal with all of it. All right, let's say, yeah, good food during COVID. You was cheating because wasn't nowhere open. I don't know how you did that.
R.L. Media said, I had some good food during COVID.
I don't know how he was able to get it. Everywhere was closed. But yeah, that's what I would say it was. I had to think about it. And again, like I say, being busy, making yourself so busy, I know that's a man thing to do, to just work and work and work. And now you're 20, 30 years older and you're angry old man, and everybody says he's so mad and angry, but you don't know how he got there. Maybe he's dealing with some things that he never talked about.
Right. So one of your cousins says, was it the apartments where you experienced the bullying? So somebody wants to know. Somebody wants to go back.
Some of it happened there.
Okay.
But
Okay.
the particular bullying I'm talking about goes back a lot further than that. But yeah, that happened there too.
Okay, so Justin, I'm sure our audience got something out of the conversation because they've been asking some very really good questions, some involved questions, and I hope we've been able to give up enough time for people to actually have their questions answered. I don't see any more here, but to our audience who joined us a little later, we are going to have part 2, May 16th at 6:30 p.m. We will be back. It will not be just Justin and me, though. We're going to have the mental health counselor, Consuela, who will come on with us as well, and you'll be able to ask questions and so forth. And Justin will talk to us some more. When we get back together, we're going to talk a little bit about the role of religion in all of this that has happened to him, and we're going to talk about attempted suicide, fidelity, and love. We're going to talk about those things, and those are awesome, really, really, really heavy subjects that we'll be talking about, but we will be talking about those as well. Someone said, with all that you have experienced, how have you become so comfortable with these truths and vulnerable stories?
Because it happened. I can't change that. So anybody that does not want to deal with me because it happened, it's 8 billion people in the world. You don't have to deal with me. And I don't want to live in a lie. I don't want to act like it didn't happen. These things have happened in my life. I know for a fact they've happened in other people's lives. And I know that the world that we live in, there's probably a higher chance that I'm dealing with people who have experienced things, maybe not my situation, but have experienced things that that caused them trauma. So for me, I'm saying, hey, we all got trauma. Let's deal with it. I'm comfortable with saying we all got trauma.
Right.
And speaking of which, if you haven't, I've told y'all about this book before. There are some things in this book that triggered me.
I'm sorry I triggered
but
you.
it was proof. That book proved what I'm saying right now. These experiences but are not unique to the individual. They are unique to you, but there's somebody who has experienced some things that you gotta oh, the name, somebody asked about the name of the book.
I just put it in the chat. I put it
in. You go flying on broken wings.
And I'm gonna put where you can get it too. Put it right here.
Yeah.
Ginceps.com.
And yes, I planned that, and I did that on purpose, just so you know, Dr. Hudson, because it's that is. Yeah, but Justin, I'm comfortable with it because it happened. It's like,
and you know what, Justin, at the end of the day, to that question that someone asked you, It's about healing, and that's what you've done. That you've been healing yourself, and as long as you're doing that, that's what's supposed to happen. You know, like we always talk about this phrase, hurt people,
Right.
but healed
Heal
people heal people.
people,
So
absolutely.
you have surrounded yourself with some people that are healed. And you know, we always say opposites attract, right? And so
Mhm.
you were attracted by the people who were healing, the
Right.
healers, and that's what you needed, because you needed to be healed. And so I'm very happy that's where you are. We know that Rome wasn't built in a day, so you're still working on it. The journey
Absolutely.
is still real. Here I am, all these years later. I'm still working on me.
Right.
And I think anybody who's trying to improve their lives or get better, that's what they're doing. They continue to work on themselves. So we have this comment here, says, thank you for this conversation. I will be waiting for part 2 and 3. It's very important to hear from men when they are healed from trauma. Absolutely. And especially Black men, because they just don't talk about it.
Mhm.
They just don't talk about it. Someone else in our audience said, what did she say? The person say, great chat, very courageous. And I like that, because we know that that's also part of the title, right? Courageous
Absolutely.
vulnerability. And Justin, just as a little sideline, I was teaching one of my university courses last night, and I was talking to one of the students, and I said, you have such courageous vulnerability. And I thought, oh my God, there's
It
the
works.
title, right? So
Yes, ma'am.
so that title is it's very powerful.
Yeah.
And when you think about it, I think we all can find somewhere in us all where we've been courageous and vulnerable,
Absolutely.
and hence courageous vulnerability. So as I said before, we're going to be signing off now, but I thank all of you for showing up and for supporting Justin. I hope you will be back on May the 16th, the same time, where we're going to continue this conversation, Justin, me, and Consuela, the mental health counselor.
Absolutely.
And so until next time, keep flying on your own wings. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.